welcome to the NCELive podcast, and my name's Nick Hurd, Chief Engagement Officer at Captiva Learning, and I'm delighted tonight to be joined by my colleague and Stato, Ben Barton, who is the Captiva Chief Research, Innovation and all sorts of crazy finding out stuff role. Ben, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, very good indeed. Yeah, had a good day.
I know we've dragged you away from football, but I know you're going to embody Stato from Badil and Skinner and enlighten us on your beavering away around retention and talent management and whatever else.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stats out there right now. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so cool. A couple of reports published. I know there's been. It's been a very interesting and upsetting week in the media around schools and inspections and the challenges that we're facing. But really, we want to hone in on the talent crisis and what you're seeing and what you've picked up from the latest research. I think NFER published something. And just to let's paint a picture of just quite where we are as a profession in terms of talent identification, talent development pathways, and how we're going to manage in this sort of current era around our recruitment and retention crisis.
Sure, and particularly around post-pandemic. So yeah, look, thanks so much for having me on. As you know, I do like to talk about these things because I do think that in teaching and education, it's almost feels like we just hear the same sorts of things all of the time. And I think what I think we're trying to do is to try and find something that a bit of hope and a bit of positivity around it. So I spent an hour, 2 hours this morning on the NFER webinar, which was all about launching their 2023 teacher labour market review. They've done this every year for the last 5 years. This is the first one that's beginning to see some sort of post-pandemic data. Headlines to that: challenges have significantly intensified, particularly after the pandemic, and I'll come on to those things. Some really interesting things around that.
I've got to be honest. We had a whole world of researchers finding that out. I think we've got thousands of colleagues in the profession that will put their hand up and say, yes, there is.
No, absolutely. And I think what was interesting was that there was about 100 people on that call, and a lot of those people, it started off with policymakers having a lot of the say, but very quickly it was, no, this is what is happening in my school right now. This is what's happening in my school. And so the colour around the stats is much more informative. So look, we know we've had challenging years in recruitment, and we had a positive uptick in during the pandemic when people were wanting to secure jobs. So we had a big uptick of people wanting to become teachers there. But we've reverted back to where it was. So primary last year was actually down off the government's target by 7%, and secondary by about 35%. This year, however, the stats from NFER are looking even worse. So it's looking like primary is going to be down 21% and secondary down 42%. And that is exacerbated in things like physics, things like mathematics. There's also something that came out today, is that the government has reduced their own target for maths teachers, which seems a bit odd given that we're trying to teach kids to 18 now, to below 3,000. It had been tracking at 3,000. I think it's about 2,500. They're still going to miss that by about 1,000 teachers. So we're in some quite significant, I think, challenging waters around recruitment. And of course, that's going to happen. It's going to hit really not this year. It's going to hit the following year. There's also some big concerns about ECF and about the pressures that it was putting on existing staff in schools. The fact that there was that additional mentoring, all of that sort of common core framework was really, really challenging. Science as well, across all three subjects. If you take biology, chemistry, physics, put them together, it's 50% behind where its target numbers are. And the target numbers are set by the STRB, which is the School Teachers Review Board, set every year, and it's plotted against huge amounts of data in terms of people leaving the country, people arriving in the country, birth rates, all the rest of it. So it's pretty accurate. And we're 50% off in science.
Do we? I mean, it's the recruitment's always, I think, a particular headline grabber, isn't it? But the working reality is that and I'd say this as a teacher, first and foremost, is that the pressures of school and the demands of school have increased exponentially in terms of the stuff that teachers are being expected to do, far beyond what was, certainly when I started my career. And I want to share with you a little anecdote because it amuses me, but I think it sums up part of the challenge. When I started as an NQT in 1999, I asked the caretaker to open the school on a Saturday so I could run rugby fixtures. And he said, you need to come down and speak to me down in my office, which was, like the boiler room of school. So I popped down to see him, and he lived on site. He lived not 50 metres from the rugby pitch. And he's had a little Ronnie Barker brown, one of those work coats or whatever else. And it was the days you could still smoke in school, just. And he lit a roll up, and he made me a cup of tea in a mug that had more limescale on it. I think you could get a thimble in it of tea. And he said, the problem with you teachers? And I was like, oh, this is going to be enlightening. I said, can I have school open Saturday? He said, sit down and have your tea. He said, the problem with you teachers, and I thought, right, here we go. And he had managed, it's like world record, to hold ash on a roll up, like an Olympic, he would have been an Olympic gold medalist. And he said, you've always done too much. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you're here asking me to open school on a Saturday. You should be at home on a Saturday resting. He said, and you're doing what you've done more. And he said, right back in the beginning as teachers, you were all doing more and it was great. But then what's happened is the more has become the minimum that you need to do. And all the time you do more, the minimum of what you need to do gets more and more. And he said, you're now at a point where you can't do any more and you want to be recognised for the more that you're doing. He said, and I was like, this is really enlightening. And I was, still very wet behind the ears. And it was only later that it kind of made sense to the whole conversation. He said, if you'd never said yes to doing more at the start, you wouldn't be as a profession in this mess. And I won't quite, because I'm conscious of profanity, but he said, you shafted yourselves because you now can't not do more because it's expected as part of the job. And if you hadn't done more to start with and said, well, no, that's outside the job, you might have had other services, things coming around it. And I was like, this is really insightful. So can I have school open Saturday for rugby? He said, no. And off I went. And the conversation has stuck with me because there's something in that, because the amount of pressure that the profession is under, in addition to teaching, is quite off the scale. And that's going to have an impact on whether teaching as a profession is something that people want to join, because there's no, that we've kind of lost the romance of the government's advert around teacher training at the minute. The difference you can make to a young person, change a young person's life. The fun and love for the subject and pedagogy is being squeezed by the immense pressure that's put on us as a profession. And that, people are going into the profession with their eyes open, and they're saying, actually, this isn't for me. It's not doable what we're asking teachers to do.
Yeah, no, look, absolutely. And again, that is what's happening. What we're seeing is post-pandemic, because we have these additional challenges of significant mental health challenges within schools. We've got big challenges around behaviour. We've got big challenges with lack of attendance. And there's nobody picking that up. CAMS isn't really working. Social care isn't really happening because, again, austerity is, and that came up a lot actually in this session this morning, as austerity came up. So where it gets to is that not only, so there's a big workload and teacher retention commission going on, which is between ASCL and a think tank called Public public first, I think. So what have they found is that basically 40% of teachers are now going above and beyond and delivering more and the more that you were offering back in 99. So they're dealing with that. There's also huge amounts of ridiculous data entry that isn't necessary. There's all this sort of silly demands around sort of marking and things like that. And what you're seeing is that teachers, compared to other graduates, are working 4.5 hours extra in the evenings on average. This is data from NFER, 4.5 hours. Whereas people working in all the other professions put together are working on average 2.5 hours. So that's significant. And that's there. I think one of the things is that it's very difficult to not only to turn away from a child, and we've heard, because we work so closely with Waltham Forest, we've heard about the challenges within the schools in that area. But it's not only about leaving the child and leaving the problems. It's actually when you close your laptop and when you stop. And this was Evelyn Ford, who's the president of ASCL, said, you're not forgetting and you're not stopping thinking about that child who was ideating suicide or that other student who was showing self-harm issues. So it's because, and that's where all of these issues are now presenting themselves. They're all presenting themselves at school, which is a safer environment than many. And I think it just is increasing that pressure on top of teachers who are already working incredibly hard and have been for years.
Yeah, I can absolutely empathise with that. I was a safeguarding lead in Lambeth, and I think at my busiest I had 40 child protection cases.
Yeah,
and then child in need beneath that, and it was very hard. It was almost a breather sigh of relief when your children come back on a Monday, having let them go for the weekend. And the holidays are very challenging and everything else. So if I'm listening now and I'm thinking about recruitment, part of the challenge I think is that we do things in a way that we've always done it. And so is there what can we learn from recruitment and understanding the difference between recruitment and hiring and as strategies to then really enable people to think differently about how they approach it. And I'll give you an example. We had a level 7 learner on program with a large multi-academy trust who went out looking for Pirate to lead one of their schools. And it was just a different way of approaching an advert. I've seen a colleague, Ben Parnell, advertising for his trust down in the Cornwall about come and work at our school. We've got the best views in the country. And it's a coastal school and it's absolutely beautiful down there. So we're starting to think differently about how we position it. But what can we learn from outside of education that may help in just attracting talent, because there is a talent crisis, full stop, and people are making informed choices based on what the employer reviews are, and all of these things go into the mix, and yet we're still struggling to get what we need in to either train or to come into vacancies.
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely. I think those are great examples of ways of doing things differently. Because I know that people who are listening to this podcast are likely doing their apprenticeship. So I've got a couple of bits of that we can send around, a couple of sort of links to reading, which is great, but off the job, as we all know. Around this, particularly a great article from Hannah Wilson, which was in Ray Snape's book about called The Head Teacher's Handbook. Now, it's a primary handbook, but actually the principles that Hannah talks about are equal there. So a lot about looking at social media. A lot of it is about, and Ben Parnell is a great example, is about what is your employer brand identity. Now, that sounds like it's really complicated and jargon, but what does it mean to work in your school? Not what your school's results are for the kids, Not what what the teachers are like. It's what is it like? What does it feel like to come to work in your school? And Ben Parnell, that's a great example. There's another one from a school business manager in Birmingham, a really difficult bit of South Birmingham, but it was one of those old Victorian schools, so you had reception on the bottom, and when you got up to year 6, you were in the top of the school. But they had a roof terrace that obviously they no longer let the children anywhere near. So health and safety reasons. He basically turned it into a roof terrace. He put lights on there. There was a view over Birmingham. Come and come and work in my school every Friday. We go up there and look over Birmingham and talk about the week. And it was just looking at something that was different. What was different about working in the school? What was slightly different? And remember, what we've got if we work in education is we've got a great draw for a lot of young people. What are we doing? We're helping other young people. We're supporting. We are giving you a job with a purpose. Now, that is important. Obviously, pay is also important. But particularly for this younger generation, this millennials, but also this Gen Z coming through, what they do and how they feel about what they do is really, really important. And we've got that in education. You don't have that in banking. You don't have that working in Costa or working in Starbucks. And I do think it is going to be this pipeline of young talent, this continuous pipeline of young talent coming into schools, which is going to help mitigate the challenges we face. Because what happens, and this comes back to the report, is you get into your mid to late 20s, you want to have a family, you want to settle down, and you're seeing a lot of your colleagues who work in other places being able to work from home, or being able to, or having remote working or hybrid working. It can drop your kid off more than one day a week in the school. So it's about making sure we have this pipeline of young talent coming through, because actually we're seeing that it's a much, much more challenging role when you have families and more commitments, I suppose.
And I guess it goes back to the resourcing and how we construct what is in essence a post-industrial Taylorist view of what school is. And I know in the budget there were suggestions around wraparound care and how we, if we're losing some of the other, I say we're losing, if some of the other care services are under stretch, when young people are in school and are in session, social services breathes out a little bit, because we know that those young people are safe and we know where they are. Is then how do we redesign maybe the school day to make it more attractive for teachers to work in it, to be able to do those flexi things, to offer that wraparound care. What does that look like? And I remember in my teaching career we had the family centres, and you had co-located facilities on school sites. That's kind of shifted away, and I think it's a design opportunity, isn't it, around how we can meet the needs of our community, and that caveated with, in my work with Multi Academy Trust, local authorities, and charities nationally, they sit on top of the biggest talent pool. We sit on top of a massive talent pool of young people, and yet we've got a crisis in our schools. And yet it's not logical for young people to leave at 18 and go off and do things when we know teachers tend to work within a 30-mile radius of where they live max. So schools are then seeing their talent exit the locality. It doesn't necessarily come back, and we haven't got that connectivity around opportunity. There's a piece of work to be done there with local commerce, with universities, partners, whatever, whether it be apprenticeship, pressure to get an undergraduate teaching degree apprenticeship through, whatever it is, so that there's an opportunity to manage talent, i.e. recruitment is the management of talent. Hiring is what you do on the 31st of May when you realise that you've got 5 teachers that have handed their notice in. Do you know what I mean? So how, there's something, we're missing something there, because intuitively, if I've got talent that loves coming to school, which the vast majority of young people do, 80-90% do, they then go, and then we've got nobody filling it back up in terms of it doesn't make sense.
And what can they be doing? because there is this
Yeah.
move and this push towards wraparound care. Well, look, the teachers can't do that because they're actually at home doing the work that they're doing to make sure the next day is going to go well. So they're already full. It's about looking at how we might better. It is about reconstructing not only the sort of the day, but also the workforce around that day and when
Yeah.
people are going to come in. So, I mean, you'll know that I've been working on this youth worker degree apprenticeship at the moment, and we're looking at that around 30-hour contracts for youth workers. That's what you need to do to become a youth worker. You need to do that over 3 years. But that 30 hours can be in all sorts of settings and all sorts of situations. So that might be you making the caretaker open up this particular room because I'm going to run an art class in there, or I'm going to do some music, or I'm going to do some poetry, whatever it might be. I'm just going to do something, but that's not going to be school. That's going to be not school. And I think that's quite important. And but also tapping into that sort of that youth sector, because they're doing a lot of those things, and particularly around the pastoral and the safeguarding side of things, they are all over that as well. So you're coming with people that understand the situation that you as a head teacher or you as a senior leader are facing day by day. The one organisation that is doing this very well is Reach. Is it Reach Felton? It's Ed Venker's school. He gets talked about a lot. He's quite a government mate, which obviously makes me not predisposed towards him. But to be fair to them, he's built a school. He's then connected the school by buying up the land around him. He got some business to help him buy up the land that links the school now to the surgery, which there was a car park or something there. He's turned that into a walkway. So he's beginning to build this community in Felton where it's an all-through school as well. So you've got people that they're in a safe environment. And to be fair to them, they're very good at turning their students into their next teachers, into the next people, the staff that are going to work in that school. And I think we need more of those, and we need more opportunities for schools to be allowed to extend in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I think if I was still working in school directly in leadership, one of the things I would look to try and do is look at retaining my own social worker to work as a consistent thread with all of the families that I worked with. And colleagues that work in the safeguarding hat on will know when you've got a social worker that sticks with the family, you've got a fair chance of creating some support and change for the family. When the social worker's changing every 2 months and moving around, like they tend to. I worked in London, so they would tend to borrow. You'd change borough and then you'd see the same social workers. That can be a challenge there as well. It's. I think there's two things that go through my mind. We could either accept our fate on it, and we will forever ad infinitum be talking about the challenge of talent within the profession, or we do something different. And I think this week in particular, we've seen people taking a stand and pushing back. I think there's a real opportunity to rethink how we manage talent and what that means in our school. And how we can then maybe make us the employer of choice for people within our community. What do those roles look like? How do we free up our teachers to do the thing that they love and are absolutely skilled at in the classroom and the teaching? Was there things from the workload review? What was that? Can we expand on that? And then what I want to do is just pop. I've just noticed my own fallibility on technology, because I'm not a Gen Z or a millennial, sadly, that people have put in things in the chat. So let me have a scoot in the chat and I'll pick up any threads from there.
Yeah, cool. I mean, this workload commission from Aspel and Public First, it's what look work. So here's the thing. I was saying that teachers are working 4.5 hours on average across all of thousands and thousands of teachers. So I'm sure people are doing a lot more than that. 4.5 hours. That's come down from 7 hours in 2015. So there's progress there, but it is about evening out this thing, because at the same time the pay isn't going in the right direction either.
Mm.
So I think it's very much about taking a stand about that data, about taking a stand about those. And I think there's sometimes some tension between what the Multi-Academy Trust feels they need to have oversight of a school and what the school actually needs to do really to keep going and to get through it. So I think it's about those sorts of issues are really challenging. I think obviously we've seen the sort of spike in behaviour issues, and we've seen the number of those sort of it's becoming this media term ghost children, so children that have either not come back from after the pandemic or are coming back Monday to Thursday and then not coming back on the Friday because their parents are at home. That's gone up to, I think it's 100,000 a week at the moment, 110,000 a week. Now, out of 13 million kids in schools, that's not huge, but it is significant. It's almost double what it was prior to the pandemic. I think that for me, it's about, and this is where it comes to the local community. You will know your school. You will know what your kids need. Nobody in Westminster knows that. You know that. And it's about providing that service first and foremost. I think of all of the things that with this Ofsted thing, the one thing that Flora, it used to be Flora Barton actually, she's now Flora Cooper, said was, yeah, I'm here for my kids. That's what I do it for. I'm here for the kids. So if they judge me as getting it wrong, then I'll say I've got it wrong, but no one else is going to do that because I'm there, and I think that's kind of and it does vary. You will have, look, we know we work in Stratford in East London. Waltham Forest is probably our biggest client ever. We work more closely with them. The challenges in those schools are very different to the challenges in, Leafy Kent or, Tunbridge or whatever, something like that. So I think it's a very much needing a sort of a local issue.
The local solution, I think, is key, and I think that if people that follow me on Twitter will know that I'm an absolute massive advocate of Be More Pirate and how we create mild acts of rebellion within the rules. And within the rules that we've got at the minute, I think Ryan's posted something around in the conversation there about AI as an opportunity in schools. How can we utilise that? And how can we reduce some of the workload by using some of the new tech coming through? But I really think there's an opportunity for schools locally to think collectively around how you manage talent in a wider sense. I was working with a cluster in South London about 18 months ago that were looking to share a couple of teachers across 5 schools that would almost be floating resource to help cover some of
Brilliant.
the supply. You and I did a visit up to a great trust up in Wakefield, who we spent a day looking at talent management, how you identify talent, how you can plan for progression. And we got into a conversation with them around, look, you've got X, £1 million of budget earmarked for supply, spend £500,000 on it on staffing and save £500,000. What does it look like? Does it change? So it's these mild acts of rebellion and giving people permission to try different things. I think if we accept our fate on it, we're going to be in the same position, full stop.
And that's so true. That's so true about Wakefield, but also about other people looking at supply in a different way. And I just wonder whether it's making me think I need to pull these case studies together, because I'll give you 2 other case studies. There's it was in Schools Week, I think last week. School in, I think, South London again. Lots and lots of supply cover. Really big issue. So what they did was they've just kitted out the gym. Okay, the gym is just full of computers now. I know you won't like that, Nick. I think they might have an additional gym. I think it's a PFI school, gym. So it's a PFI gym. School, so they're never going to pay it off, but they've got an extra gym. And that's where the kids go. If teach doesn't turn up, that's where the kids go. Because one of the issues about supply is that, yes, you get some really good long-term supply people, but you also get some challenges. And you don't have that consistency of understanding what are the children learning or students learning that hour. and what do they now need to know a week later? So actually pulling that together, they were using Oak National Academy. You can use all sorts of other online providers are available. You can use that sort of content to do that. So that's one. I mean, the other thing, and this was I think this was good. So the school in Greenwich, primary school in Greenwich, 2-form entry, huge amounts of issues with supply, very, very challenging area. I think it's the sort of the average distance to work, distance to school from home was 500 meters, right? And then I thought, what's this school going to be like, right? It's basically a school with 4 tower blocks around it. So everybody just going down and into the school. So I mean, very, very challenging area. So what this teacher did was say, right, I'm paying 300 grand a year supply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my local university and I'm going to get 4 trainee teachers. And I'm just going to put them in. One's going to be in early years, 1 in Key Stage 1 and 2 in Key Stage 2. And they're just going to be floating. They're going to learn their job. They're going to float around. They're going to help. And what she said was that sickness reduced because everybody just felt there was somebody there, somebody else, another pair of hands in the room, another pair of hands helping, who actually could deal with young children who were challenged, or that sort of stuff. Now she's put that into a system now. So every year group now has a trainee teacher. She's using the teacher apprenticeship to do it. So she's, getting the funding off Greenwich and doing it that way. So she's got, in every school year, she's got 2 teachers and a trainee. And that trainee, obviously, because they're doing a teacher apprenticeship, has got to have a timetable. So that's just taking the pressure off it. But it's just innovations like that we need to get more into a wider audience, because it's about trying it and seeing how that works.
I think what you just said there is absolutely key, isn't it? Because if we don't try something and it doesn't work, there's nothing lost. If we try something and it doesn't work, well, we're no better than not trying anything at all. And if we find something that is powerful and adds value, then we want to try and do more of it. And I think maybe part of this is having the capacity to think around these problems. You and I get to bat ideas around and try them out and take these suggestions out to schools and multi-academy trust leaders and say, look, have you thought about this? What would this work? I'm working with a large multi-academy trust in the north, looking at how to create roles to tackle persistent absenteeism, some of those ghost children.
Yeah.
And they're thinking really innovatively around that and seeing it in a wider youth work context, rather than it being somebody, I got when I was at school, the kids, if I used to do home visits, there's no one answered the door because people thought I looked like a member of CID, which is comical because I'm not sure that I do, but or did. And it's like, well, actually, if somebody's more reflective of the community knocking on the door to then try and engage a family or a disaffected family or a young person, whatever else, it's going to have more impact and resonance. If I've got young people in school, I've got a chance to support them and then educate them. What does that look like? And it's just interesting, the different types of innovations and it's piracy within a structure to say, right, well, we maybe can do it differently. Do we hire a social worker and have a resident social worker in school? I think we moved the needle forward in terms of counselling and therapeutic support. Well, actually, that's an extension of it. So how can we do these things, structural things, to take the pressure that invariably invades and permeates into the classroom, so that it enables teachers the space to then be excellent in their pedagogy and practice.
Absolutely. And do you find, Nick, that when you're doing those, how does it work most effectively when somebody can actually, an organisation can actually get together and do it? Who needs to be in the room? Does it need to be when does that? When's the best time to do it? I mean, I don't know. How does?
Do you know what I think where we are at the minute, the best time to do it is the time that you do it. Do you know what I mean? In an ideal world, we would be trying to do that pre-budget and then looking at, how are we going to reduce our supply spend? That's a known amount this time for the year gone, isn't it? We're coming into budget season. So if I know that, what am I? If I reduce my budget spend on supply by half, then what could I do with that revenue, that capital, to do something different with it? I think that in terms of the people that you'd want in the room, you would want your leadership team. The best, and this is a plea to educators when you're looking for HR and HR personnel, whatever, go from outside education, because where it has the most resonance and you get the most impact is when you work with a HR professional or a head of people type role that has come from outside of education, because they view the challenge differently. Part of the problem, I believe, and I say this with love as being a career teacher, is that we've been taught to think in a certain way as children. We then think in a certain way as professionals within the sector. To conceive and come up with new thinking outside of that is really, really hard. Actually, when you bring outside expertise in, I was with a trust today where head of people was the chief finance officer was ex-military, the head of people had come from industry.
Yeah.
They see the talent challenge in a different way. It's not a problem, it's just a challenge that we're going to overcome, and their innovations and thinking's different. So at a minimum, you want to get an SLT together and actually spend 80% of the school budget spent on staffing, 80% of the time isn't spent thinking about staff. It's more about the young people. We need to change that round. So then think about the staff, think about development pathways, and then we can start to find those spaces for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it is about getting that sort of right mix of people, having people that are coming from sort of outside organisations as well. Because I do think that sometimes we're in education. I mean, just for full disclosure, I've never been a teacher. I did do a couple of years as a TA. I was really good at getting kids through maths, but I wasn't very good at any of the other rules, so I didn't become a teacher. But it's, I think what's is trying to get that opportunity to think differently, and then to be able to not be afraid to try. So here's, Ryan has put in the chat, how do we make, how do we make leaders in the school be braver and say they're doing it their way for their students? A lot of it is about, I think, and this is, take this advice if you want to, is doing it and asking for forgiveness later rather than asking for permission. And if anybody is sort of pushing back against that, then I would always sit there and say, it's a pilot. We're not doing this forever. We're trying this out. And one of the things, I'll come back to this, is that the reason you need to pilot it is because all the evidence in the world is never going to focus on your school and your community. It's why, there's all sorts of stuff about evidence-informed this, evidence-informed that. It's very difficult to have properly evidence-informed research in education, because they're human beings. So I think it's about trying that stuff, trying things, and it may be small wins. First of all, it may just be, I'll tell you what we're all going to do is we are going to have 15 minutes where we're just going to explore as many different ideas as possible to solve this particular problem. No bad ideas. I think it is trying to think about ways of just unblocking that. But also, I think this is the really difficult thing as leaders. We have to stand up. We have to say, no, look, I'm doing this because I know this is right for my kids. I know this is right for now. So it's this is all kind of bigger stuff. I was just going to say to you, don't use the TES for your advertising because of this, that, and the other. But I do think it is it's fun. I have got some cheap, quick and dirty ideas for that at the end, but don't worry about that. But I think it is about dealing with these quite fundamental issues about why we're here. What are we trying to do? And what do we have to now do because of the pandemic, because of the breakdown because of austerity? Someone's got to stand up, and it's more than likely going to be teachers. It's more than likely going to be schools.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm absolutely not, and I don't think you are either. Sort of belittling the high risk accountability stakes that we work in with education, and I think it's about that's where the pirating analogy. So, Be More Pirate by Sam Conniff. If you haven't read it, it's your starting point, Ryan, on how to go about this and create acts of rebellion within structure is a good place to go about it. And I think doing what's right locally, you know, there's so much opportunity to think differently around how we tackle the problem, but I think there's so much pressure in the system that we don't necessarily afford the space to do it. Um, Vicky shared about her experience of being in teacher training, then working in recruitment and talent management, and then coming back in and inviting people that see things differently. Matthew Said talks about I think it's Rebel Ideas or Black Box Thinking, the need for cognitive diversity. And I think we're quite nebulous. We stay within education. We'll go and ask someone in education. Actually, get out. I urge you to get out within the community and speak to the people that are doing the same, facing the same challenges around recruitment and attention, and find out what they're doing. How are you going to attract talent in? And then once you've got it, what are the conditions that you're going to create within the working environment that people want to stay? It's not always about finance. And I think that's really coming through with the millennial expectations of the work. They want to believe in something. They want to follow somebody and have a vocation and a passion. And they want to make sure that they're remunerated. But it's not so much driven by the money anymore. It's about how much I can contribute and how I will belong. And they're going to be a generation of teachers that are going to be probably in the classroom 5-10 years max, and then we'll go and do a completely different profession anyway, because that's what young people are doing now.
And they may actually within that other profession still do teaching five hours a week, because actually that
Yeah,
keeps them fresh, that keeps them in that.
yeah,
And I think it is this the world has become incredibly flexible. The world has become
yeah,
incredibly flexible. Now the Burgundy Book, which is all your terms and conditions, hasn't been updated since 1990. That's like Google wasn't invented then, and the terms and conditions that you're working under as a teacher haven't been changed since then. It's like, and I,
I'll
but it,
tell you what, mate. That's a Chat GPT project. That lob the
that
Burgundy
is,
book
isn't it?
in and
Actually,
say, turn that into something for today. Ryan, I bet you're already on it, doing it. But I think there's just being open to different innovations, and I think, like you say, ask permission. Don't ask permission, ask for forgiveness. If it's going to have an impact, it will stick, and if it doesn't, then you try something else. That's what we would do outside of education, wouldn't it?
um, just to come back to some very straight, quick fire recruitment
Okay,
sort of.
before
All
you
right,
say this,
all right.
right? I in my mind, I've got Bill Nye in Love Actually, where he does his Christmas #1 thing. So can you just be really careful what you're going to say,
No, no,
because I don't need any litigation around
no. There's
Ben
going to be
Barton.
no, 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 not at all, not at all, not at all. Look, so quick fire sort of things about what some of you will know, some of you won't know, is that in 2015 when I joined Captiva, I was working as a recruiter. I was doing sort of recruitment, so not very well, it must be said. I was actually really, really bad at it, and thankfully they moved me into teacher training. But some of the things is every single person in your school, every single parent in your school will know somebody that either is a teacher or wants to be a teacher. So it's free, it's an email, tap them up. Do you know anybody that would want to work in this school? That's one. Second one, and this is Hannah talks about a lot about this, is use your social networks, be they Facebook, be they Twitter, be they TikTok, whatever. Don't be afraid to say, we've got this post in this school, we're amazing, it's we have a roof garden, or we don't, or we're just a great group of people. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, do try and use, wherever you can, the DFE site for recruitment and retention. It is free. So you can post a job up there for free. Make sure that job doesn't link back to your eTeach account or your TES account, because otherwise you're doing the work and paying TES and eTeach as well. Look, there's no problem. TES and eTeach do a job, and they do it relatively well. But they started out by recruiting to everybody. They go out to everyone. Your next recruit to your school will come. Nick was quite close. It's 21 kilometres. 70% of recruits to schools come from 21 kilometres. They're working 21 kilometres radius from where you are. So definitely go local around that. So referrals, social media, use free sites where you possibly can. Would be my sort of top three. But I do think it starts with going back, and I'll send the sort of the couple of slides we've done around this, around employer brand identity. Find out about, what do people think of our school? Google your school and look at the news section. Put it into Trustpilot or Glassdoor or Rate My Teacher, because that's what people who are looking to work in are going to do. So find out what's your school like, and then what are those positive elements and this is where you need to engage with your current staff. What are those? What makes you keep coming back when it's February and you're knackered and you're working 4.5 hours extra every week and you're not getting what you should rightfully get as pay? Why do you keep coming back here? What are those things? And it's likely to be the ethos, the kids, the other teachers. If you're lucky, guys, it'll be because my leaders are great. But it's about finding those things, and that's what goes in your job advert. That's what goes in any post about your job. It's what it's like to work here. Not that you're an Ofsted whatever. It's about what it's like to work here.
And that's really, really brilliant. Thank you. I also think the application process, we have to do an application form, and that's part of the safeguarding and our responsibility for checking. The personal statement doesn't have to be a written statement. I haven't yet worked or come across a school that said, send us a 5-minute TikTok video or a video of why you want to join our school and what you can do and what you're going to bring to the role. And I think we need to address how millennials and young people are accessing media and content and what they enjoy doing, as opposed to saying, come and join teaching, fill out this really long form. Well, we've got to do that, so you're going to have to do that, and then write 2 A4 sides on why you think you would need to get the job. The reason we lose so much talent out is because applying and being involved isn't as fun as other opportunities. How can we do that recruitment process different? And will that yield in more applications? Colette put around 8 applications for a pastoral manager, none for a teacher. Is it the application process that's created that, and people aren't dialing into that? If you go out again for your maths teacher, I'd love to do a little experiment with you where we'll say, right, we'll go out for a maths teacher and we'll do something completely different in terms of how you're going to advertise for that maths teacher. If you don't get a maths teacher, you're no better off because you still got 8 applicants for your pastoral role, so you haven't lost anything. And it will be those innovations and those innovators that are thinking differently that are going to be attracting talent. And then it will be why it's important to stay at your school or your trust will be what keeps them there. Ben, we could talk for hours on this. If people want to find out more, and I'm sure people will want to dial in and ping you an email, reference slides. What's the best way to do that? And I know we've literally scratched like a millimetre of the surface, but in as everything we're trying to do, trying to get you to think, and hopefully people listening will think and try and do things differently around this challenge. How can they connect to you to find out more?
I don't know what you want me to say. I mean, I'm on Twitter.
Sorry. Oh, Twitter. Okay, good. Go on. How can we find you on Twitter?
So that's at Barton Education. So I'll put that in the chat. But I'm quite old, so I also like email.
Oh, I thought you were going to say fax. Okay, email.
but I will also send through to this group the slides that I've been sort of working through, the link to the NFER report. I mean, in a way, I'll be honest with you, it just will make you sad. So you might not want to do that. But then I've got these 2 chapters. I will get these 2 chapters out, and I'll put these in the chat as well. From this, from Head Teacher's Handbook. They're 2 bit.ly links. They just work well. I think they work really well. It's just a stack of ideas. So let me just see if I can into the chat. Sorry, I will get this done. I should be glad to.
And that's the sound, ladies and gentlemen, of a middle-aged man multitasking.
All right, I've done it now. But yes, it is.
What chat have you put it in? It hasn't put up. It hasn't come up. Right. Okay. Hopefully that's everyone can see that. If you do want to find out more, do reach out to either Ben or myself, and I'm really excited to share any ideas or innovations that I'm seeing. I'll get to move a lot of information around a good practice. And if, as I say, if we accept where we are, we'll always get what we've always got. And if we maybe try and innovate and do something different and it works, great. If it does, we can share it. If it doesn't, we can share it and someone else might try it and it might work. So that would be really useful. Go on, mate. Sorry.
But also, if you've got any ideas you want to run past people, then do just connect with me and Nick. Basically, it's what we really like doing. But it's also, we've got this, and particularly Nick has got this depth of experience of just talking to hundreds and hundreds of schools every week through multi-academy trusts and local authorities to say, I've seen this work here, it didn't work so well there. So we can give you quite an instant response on what can and can't work. Look, the bottom line is we're here to help and support you to move forward in your careers as Captiva Learning through your apprenticeship. But we're also here to help you get through the week or the term or the day. And if there's things that you're worried about, if you're nervous about approaching people about new ideas, then we can work through that as well.
Okay, well, look, Ben, always a pleasure. I know you and I are probably the Olympic and world champion noses on this. If we can help, then do reach out. You can find Ben at Barton Ed on Twitter, and I'm at R Optimism. And look forward to working with you all, picking your brains and actually changing things. Hopefully you have a good rest of Thursday night, and good luck with Friday. I believe it's going to be wet and windy everywhere, so we know that's a joy on a school afternoon break duty or lunch duty. So my best wishes and love are with you, and see you next month for next instalment of NCELive. Take care and good night.
Cheers, guys. Nice to meet you.